There is a specific kind of person you have encountered. You may not have had a word for them at the time, but you felt them. You felt the way the air changed when they entered a room. You felt the subtle pressure to perform, to shrink, to manage their mood before your own. You left interactions with them feeling somehow responsible for things that were never your fault. And the strangest part, you kept going back. Not because you wanted to, but because something in you had been quietly trained to. This is not a video about becoming harder. It is not about revenge, or winning, or making someone regret you. Those are the wrong goals entirely, and they come from the same emotional framework that made you vulnerable in the first place. This is a video about something quieter. About the particular quality that certain people carry, a stillness, a groundedness, a psychological presence that makes manipulation structurally impossible. Not because they fight back, but because there is simply nothing in them to grip. Toxic behavior is not random. It is targeted. It looks for specific things: the need to be understood, the fear of silence, the discomfort with disapproval, the impulse to over-explain. And when it cannot find those things, it has no entry point. What follows is not a list of tactics. It is a portrait of an inner state. The behaviors described here are not performed. They emerge naturally from a certain kind of psychological maturity. And the quiet power they carry is not the goal, it is the byproduct. The first behavior is so subtle that most people never notice they're missing it. It is the ability to let a conversation end without resolution. Most people have a deep, almost physical discomfort with things left unfinished. A tension that wasn't released. A misunderstanding that wasn't corrected. A silence that wasn't filled. Toxic people are expert students of this discomfort. They create situations that feel unresolved on purpose, a comment that lands strangely, a withdrawal that seems significant, an ambiguity that invites you to chase clarity. And you chase it. Because the discomfort is real, even if the problem isn't. The person who makes toxic people genuinely uncomfortable is the one who has learned to sit inside unresolved tension without needing it fixed. Not from coldness. Not from indifference. But from a deep enough relationship with their own inner state that they no longer require external resolution to feel okay. They can let a conversation be strange. They can let a silence speak. They can leave a room without knowing what someone thought of them and feel, genuinely, at peace with that. This is not a technique. It is the result of years of quiet inner work. But when someone carries it, toxic behavior bounces off them like light off still water. The second behavior is the absence of justification. Watch what happens when most people are challenged. They explain. They provide context, evidence, reasoning. They map the logic of their choices to someone who did not ask in good faith and will not receive the answer in good faith. The explanation becomes a kind of offering, proof of reasonableness, proof of worth. And the person receiving it gains exactly what they wanted: your attention, your energy, your implicit acknowledgement that their opinion of you holds weight. The person who unsettles a manipulator most is the one who simply doesn't. Not angrily. Not dismissively. They just don't justify. They state. They decide. They act. And when challenged, they look back with an expression of genuine calm that communicates something profoundly disorienting to someone used to getting reactions: I don't need you to understand me in order to proceed. This is one of the quietest and most powerful things a human being can communicate. It requires no words. It only requires that you have genuinely stopped making your internal sense of self dependent on external approval. The third behavior is the willingness to disappoint without guilt. There is a version of kindness that is not kindness at all. It is the management of other people's emotional states in order to avoid the discomfort of their disappointment. It wears the costume of generosity but is functionally a form of self-protection. Toxic people rely entirely on this. They cultivate the sense that your care for them requires constant demonstration. that saying no is a form of cruelty. That your own needs, placed before theirs, reveal something unflattering about your character. The emotionally mature person has worked through the grief of this realization. They understand that disappointing someone and harming someone are not the same thing. They can say no with warmth. They can hold a boundary without a speech. They can watch someone be unhappy with their decision and feel not guilt, not the urge to fix it, but a quiet, steady compassion that does not collapse into capitulation. A person who can genuinely disappoint you without losing sleep over it is, to a manipulator, essentially weaponless. Every tool they have requires your need for their approval to function. The fourth behavior is observation without commentary. Toxic people perform. They create emotional theater, drama, crisis, conflict, spectacle. And they need an audience. More specifically, they need an audience that reacts. The reaction is the fuel. It confirms the reality of the performance. It gives the behavior somewhere to land. The person who quietly watches without commentary, who neither validates nor attacks, but simply observes with a kind of patient, non-judgmental clarity, creates an experience most manipulators find genuinely destabilizing. Not because the observer is cold, but because their stillness removes the audience entirely. You cannot perform for someone who is simply watching you with calm eyes and no visible emotional stake in the outcome. The absence of reaction is not passive. It is one of the most active forms of psychological self-possession available to a human being. The fifth behavior is the complete absence of performed strength. Paradoxically, the thing that most intimidates a person who feeds on psychological dominance is not strength displayed, it is strength that requires no display. Most people, when they feel threatened, either collapse or show their teeth. Both are reactions. Both confirm that the threat landed. The person who changes something in the room, the one who makes a certain kind of manipulator quietly recalibrate, is the one who doesn't appear to have registered the threat at all. Not through suppression, not through false calm, but through genuine psychological groundedness that is simply bigger than the provocation. This is not something you can fake for long. It comes from having sat with your own fear long enough that it no longer controls your face. From knowing your own value with enough quiet certainty that you don't need to defend it. Real solidity doesn't announce itself. It just exists. And in the presence of someone who genuinely has it, manipulation has no psychological leverage point. The sixth behavior is speaking less than expected. Language is one of the primary arenas of social control. People use words to define situations, establish dominance, redirect blame, reframe reality. Toxic people are often highly skilled with language, not because they are intelligent, but because most people are so anxious to fill silence that they say more than they intended and reveal more than is wise. The person who is comfortable saying very little, who can answer a loaded question with a single sentence, who can meet an emotional escalation with a few quiet words, who does not feel the pull to fill every silence with reassurance, this person is, conversationally, almost impossible to manipulate. You cannot twist words that haven't been spoken. You cannot use admissions that were never made. The quiet person is not withholding out of hostility. They are simply at peace inside the silence in a way that doesn't require the other person's participation. And that peace, for someone trying to create chaos, is the most disorienting thing in the world. The seventh behavior is the one all the others flow from. It is knowing, with quiet and unshakable certainty, who you are and needing no one else to confirm it. Every form of manipulation requires one thing, that you care what the manipulator thinks of you. That your sense of self has a gap in it that their approval can fill or their disapproval can damage. The entire architecture of psychological control depends on that gap existing. And there are people, not perfect people, not cold people, not people without wounds, who have done enough inner work that the gap has quietly closed. Not through armor, not through hardness, but through the slow, unglamorous process of sitting with themselves long enough to know what they actually value, what they actually believe, what they actually need. These people are not impressive in obvious ways. They don't dominate rooms. They don't perform confidence. They simply exist with a steadiness that has no obvious edge to grip. And toxic behavior, which is always a form of fishing for a reaction, slides past them without catching. This is not a destination most people arrive at suddenly. It is a daily practice. A return, over and over, to the question of who you actually are beneath everything that has been layered onto you. And every time you return to that question and stay with it honestly rather than looking to someone else to answer it for you, the gap closes a little more. The quiet truth is this: the person who is most feared by those who manipulate is not the one who fights hardest. It is the one who needs least. Not because they are empty, but because they are, in the deepest sense, already full.